What are the easiest types of healthcare data to collect? And on the flip side of that, what are the hardest ones?
That's a great question. So the easiest kinds of data to collect are what are called phenotype data, which is kind of stuff that we know about each other just by seeing each other. You know, I can see if you're sick or not, you can see if I'm sick or not. Checking your blood, for example, is a good one. So any kinds of observable facts that we can get just by looking at each other are the kinds of data that we've been collecting for hundreds of years, and that's really easy to get. The hardest ones, of course, are those that are on the genetic side or on the proteomic side, the ones that get a little bit harder than that. So when you look at ease, it's the ones that seem the easiest when your doctor asks you a bunch of questions, and the hardest would be the ones that you have to get actually poked for and a lab test done, or genetic or proteomic kinds of data.
That makes sense. Now, in a recent post on Radar, you noted that current health IT approaches and methods reward closed systems.
Yeah.
How can that be changed? What are the first steps towards moving past it?
Yeah, and so the best way to change that really is that the kinds of data that patients need directly, like you and I would need directly, must be opened up. And so the good news is that the government is actually pushing that kind of data, so it's called patient accessible data. And a lot of the observations and the genes and the tests that are done about us is available today, but the problem is that whether it's the hospital, whether it's the physician, et cetera, they're not made to open that up and give it to us. I mean, it'd be silly for a bank to tell us, I'm not going to tell you what your account looks like or how much money you have in your account. But today, physicians and hospitals aren't forced to do that, and new regulations that are coming out as early as this year and next are starting to change that. So they must provide the data within 24 hours of access, within 48 hours of access. So that's one thing, is make it easy by forcing these guys to do it. And number two is teaching chief information officers, systems vendors, et cetera, how it is we can use these kind of open source tools that we're all discussing here to be able to create open systems without having to spend a lot of money.
Now, is health IT significantly different from other systems and industries? It seems like it's sometimes portrayed that way.
Yeah, it is portrayed that way, but often it should not be. Really, there's not, when we look at big data, for example, like genetic data or proteomic data or some of the phenotype data that I talked about, that used to be big, 10, 15 years ago, meaning that large data sets were large data sets. Now they're no longer large. I mean, we have big data in other industries that are just as big or even bigger than those in healthcare. So yes, it's different in the sense of if you get some data wrong, like if I got my bank account's quantity wrong, I've lost a little money. I get my blood test type wrong, I get my lab results wrong. When things go wrong, things look very different because the consequences are different. But in essence, the actual structuring of the data, how it can be used, et cetera, is really not that different. And vendors want you to think it's different, vendors in that space, because they see open source and other things encroaching, and they really don't want to. They want to say, hey, wait a minute, we're very different because we take care of life and death, but really it's not that different.
And does the fear-driven thing come with, a higher price tag or
It does in some respects, in that there are more lawsuits for things that go wrong for health than for other things. But that's starting to change too, because they're the kinds of things that the government wants you to do with data, they're forcing you to now do. So it used to be people used to say, no, I can't do this because I'll be sued for it. But now, because the government is enforcing it, you might as well use open common tools to be able to make sure that you're not spending a whole lot of money trying to hide that data. Open it up, and once we open up the data, I think what we'll find out over time is that there's so much value in doing so that vendors can start to get paid for opening up their data. And once you've got the financial incentive aligned with the market incentives, we're going to look back in this 5-10 years from now and say, oh, what were they all complaining about? They were complaining because they thought they were going to be forced to do things that they didn't want to do, which is true for a little while, but they will realize that there's enough economic value, just like Tim said this morning in his talk around open source providing enormous, significant economic value to small businesses, medium-sized businesses. That's what we're going to see in the medical business in the same way that we've seen everywhere else.
You mentioned 5 to 10 years. Is that the timeline you're thinking for that?
Yeah, I think that it takes a little bit of time simply because hospitals and physicians are slower to adopt certain kinds of technology, not because they don't like technology. I mean, they understand technology just as well as anybody else. For example, iPhones, iPads, et cetera, have been picked up in those industries just as fast. But transactional systems, if you think about the systems sitting in hospitals, those are 20-year-long systems, right? Those cycles would just take a little bit longer. So in those respects, it'll take some time. But the patient-centric movement, the consumerization of healthcare data, that's moving very, very rapidly. So there's parts of this that are very consumer-focused that are going to move very, very fast. but the back-end systems are going to take a while. Just like, for example, 10, 15 years ago, as banks and insurance companies started to move online, we needed companies like Mint.com to come in and do the front end and to connect to the back end using systems like Yodlee or others. And we're going to see the same thing in healthcare. There's going to be front end companies like Runkeeper, who's doing a whole bunch of quantified self, that are going to have to connect to these back end systems, and slowly but surely those back end systems will start to get
interesting. That's definitely something to watch for, right? So, last question for you, and relevant to where we are here at OSCON. Can frameworks like Bootstrap and jQuery be used as part of electronic health record systems? And
Absolutely.
If so, I mean, what are the benefits that are available?
I think there are huge benefits, because one of the problems that we have in electronic health record solutions today is that they're not very integration friendly. They're not integration friendly because everybody uses their own frameworks, everybody uses isolated systems, sometimes legacy systems. But if you look at the modern way of building things, what do we say? Use common authentication systems. Use common front-end systems, so that if I want to create a widget from one electronic health record solution and connect to another electronic health record solution from the user interface to user interface, Bootstrap, jQuery, these kind of things make things very, very easy. You look at protocols like OData, these open kind of protocols make things easier, and now because the vendors are being forced to do it by the government, now is even more of a time for them to look at it, because they want to keep that cost of transitioning from legacy to modern as low as possible. And these are all free tools. They're mostly not accustomed to free tools. So we have a lot of free tools. Not only is it applicable in healthcare, but it's very well applicable because of the fact that there are no two healthcare systems that can stand alone. There's no scenario in which your doctor's system and my doctor's system cannot talk if both of us move to each other's physician's offices. So in the normal, let's say, consumer world, you can get by with systems not being integrated. But in the healthcare world, people's lives depend on it. It is important data, and things like Bootstrap, jQuery, anything that helps two systems connect with each other are not only applicable, but they're almost necessary to be able to be used.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks for having me.